So do you have anything wrong with your health or your body? If your answer is yes, the chances are you have a problem with your nutrition. See, we don't often think about what we eat. And I know I never used to think about what I used to eat. In fact, I used to be a lard boy. This is what I look like. That's me. So when you start looking at me there, I'm the tall one with the stripes, by the way. The thing about this is that as an elite golfer, I had a bad back. And the problem with that was that, I was in a lot of pain. I was trying to work with lots of people to get my back fixed. And I was working with ex-All Blacks physios, I was working with chiropractors, I was working with all sorts of people, and I couldn't get my back fixed, so I became a professional golf coach. And then as a professional golf coach, I was trying to get my back fixed. And what happened? I met a lady who looked at me, and she said, "Ben, I can see you've got a problem in your back." And I'm like, "How do you know I've got a problem in my back?" And she's like, "Well, I can see that you've got a twist in your pelvis, you've got a scoliosis in your spine, you've got one shoulder higher than the other. And when you're swinging a golf club, your transverse abdominal muscle's not firing, and you've got no support for your back." And I've looked at her and gone, "Well, I know some of that. I've been working with good people." And she's then looked at me and she's gone, "Well, I can see that it's actually driven from a food intolerance. Looks like it's dairy." And I've looked at her and gone, "Dairy, food intolerance? What are you talking about?" And she was like, "Well, when you've got a food intolerance, it shuts down your small intestine. And when it shuts down your small intestine, it then shuts down the organs and the muscles that are on that same circuit, and you've got no support for your back." And I'm like, what makes you think it's dairy? And she looks at me and she goes, "Well, I can tell you don't breathe very well through your nose, and so your head's migrated forward so you can breathe better through your mouth." And so my posture back then was pretty much like that. And so I'm like, "Well, what should I do?" And she's like, "Well, cut out dairy." And I'm like, "Okay." And I'm like, "Oh, is there a test I can take?" She's like, "Yeah, you can take a test. You can take a IgG, a food intolerance test. It has to go to America." And I'm like, "I'll do that too." And anyway, I cut out dairy. But my back didn't get better straight away. But what did happen very, very quickly was I flattened my abdominal wall for the first time in my life. Now, that might not sound like much to you, but for me, that was fantastic, right? Because my whole life, one of my earliest memories was sitting in the bath next to my brother and looking down and having a big tummy, having a big poo-poo, okay? And then something else happened, looking back, is that I'd had asthma as a child, and I'd had asthma in my adult life, and what happened is my asthma disappeared. And that was fantastic. And then my back got better. And the thing about this was, I was so blown away by that I was more interested in nutrition than I was in hitting a golf ball. I'd rather read nutrition textbooks than go play golf. And so I quit my job as a professional golf coach and went and retrained through one of the top health and performance institutes in California, the Czech Institute. And a decade ago opened up a health and performance clinic, helping people with their nutrition. So the thing about this is when we start looking at what we're actually eating currently when it comes to nutrition. Okay, so let's look at some of these statistics. Heart disease is the #1 killer of New Zealanders at 44% of deaths. Now, America leads the world at 45% of deaths. Interestingly enough, in America, 1909, under 10% of deaths were from heart disease. And so in the last 100 years, it's got dramatically worse. When you look at new registrations for cancer in New Zealand, have increased by 18.7% from 2000 to 2010. 18.7% increase in cancer. That's crazy. Obesity has tripled in the last 3 decades in New Zealand. Tripled. And then the US Centre for Disease Control states that 1 in 3 children born in 2000 will develop type 2 diabetes. So we know that's going to be pretty similar in New Zealand. So if you have a 14-year-old in your life, they've got a 1 in 3 chance of developing type 2 diabetes. And the trouble is that the food we're eating is not really food. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. So you might think, we're living longer though, right, Ben? Well, individuals are not living longer. As a population, as a group, we're living longer. It's just because less people are dying younger. Less people are dying from infant mortality. Less people are dying from infections because we've got antibiotics. Yes, less people are dying from accidents because we've got incredible acute medical care. okay? But as individuals, we're probably not actually living any longer. In fact, a statistician in London has recently stated that if you have an overweight child, the chances are that you will outlive that child because of modern diseases. And like I say, the problem is that most of the food we're currently eating is not food, all right? So there's only one problem in your body, and that is that your cells are not working the way that evolved and designed to work. So we're made up of 5 to 10 trillion cells, and we're replacing millions of cells every day from the food we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe, and any additional supplements you may bring into your body. You literally are what you eat. We replace our liver every 300 to 500 days. We replace virtually every cell in our body every 7 years, which is wonderful because if you think about that, if you have anything wrong with you, in 7 years' time, you can build yourself a new body. And I also think it's neat that, if you've been married for 21 years, technically you're on your third husband or third wife. So there's benefits. But food is no longer food. So what food is this? What is it? Well, that's a strawberry flavouring for a strawberry milkshake that a fast food chain was using. So where's the strawberry? Oh no, hasn't got any strawberry in it. All it's got is a chemical that lights up areas of your brain, and your body goes, that's kind of like strawberry. It's worse than that when we start looking at there's hidden dangers in our food supply, things that we can't even see. And so these are pesticides and herbicides. And I was talking at a seminar a number of years ago, well, it was a couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago. And I was talking about atrazine. So atrazine is a broadleaf herbicide. That's the most commonly used herbicide for cropping. And I was talking about in 1984, the Environmental Protection Agency made note of its cancer-causing property. And they were going to ban it, but they didn't ban it for whatever reason. And a gentleman put up his hand and said, Ben, I'm the chief water hydrologist for local regional council, and we test for atrazine in the water. And the groundwaters in where I was are contaminated with atrazine. And I'm like, really? And he goes, yeah. He goes, I'll send you the research if you like. So this is the 5th National Survey of Pesticides in Groundwater in New Zealand, okay? And published in the New Zealand Journal of Marine and Freshwater Research. These are all the pesticides and herbicides found in New Zealand's drinking waters. Astounding, astounding. Now, fortunately, they are very, very low levels, which is good, right? Which is very good. And then in 2009, I was watching the news, and a segment came up on the news and said, the New Zealand Total Diet Study has just come out looking at the pesticides and herbicides in our foods, and they're all completely safe to eat. And I was like, great, fantastic, I'm pleased about that. So I got the study, it's a massive book. And I started reading it, and I started looking up iodine, which is a chemical fungicide that's used in growing food. And so this is the EPA, likely human carcinogen. That's how they've classified this chemical, right? So I started looking at iodine residues, and you start looking at nectarines coming from Napier. If you eat a kilo of nectarines, you're going to get 180 micrograms of this chemical, of a likely human carcinogen. 180 micrograms. That might not mean much to you, but let me put that in perspective. 150 micrograms of iodine is the RDA, the recommended daily allowance of iodine we should be getting, 150 micrograms. That's iodine's a known nutrient for human health, right? And they're saying 180 micrograms of this likely carcinogen is fine. I don't know about that. And if your nectarines are in Auckland, 490 micrograms because they have to spray a lot more because it rains more. So when you start looking at, this is a book by Pesticides and Breast Cancer, A Wake-Up Call, Mary Watts, it's just full of research looking at these things. For me, I believe that we've had tens of thousands of chemicals increased into our diet in the last 70 years. And a lot of them are estrogenic, so they mimic estrogen within your body, which then means they have an affinity for cells that have a lot of estrogen receptors, for example, breast cells. And so we then start looking at cancer increasing by 18.7% in New Zealand from 2000 and 2010. It's not hard to start looking at possible correlations as to why. These toxins are often stored in body fat. So we start looking at obesity. Now I want to show you some obesity levels. How did we get so obese? I want to show you some obesity levels. I'm going to start with America. This is 1985 in America. Okay, the dark blues 10 to 14%, under 10% light blue, obesity levels. So in the advent of this is just as the low-fat diet was coming in. So the low-fat diet's coming in, and just look and see what happens to obesity as you go forward. 2001, 2003, we're above 30% now, the red. Okay, and there's combination 1985 to 2010. So obesity is just sweeping through the Western world. It's exactly the same in New Zealand. Exactly the same in New Zealand. In the late 1970s, obesity sat at 9% of the population. Okay? So think back when you were at school, how many really overweight kids were there in your class? Chances are there probably wasn't that many. And in 2013, 31% of the New Zealand population is obese. Right? So it's tripled just over 3 decades. Now, in the same time period, carbohydrate consumption has increased by 41%. So what we've done, we've basically replaced fat with carbohydrates. And we know that when you replace fat with carbohydrates, particularly sugar and processed grains that act on your body as sugar, it increases the release of a hormone called insulin. And insulin is the primary hormone that makes you store fat. So we pretty much know what's driving a lot of this. So what should we eat? Well, based on the work of Dr. Weston A. Price, there's a continuum of what healthy people should eat. At one end of the scale, you've got Inuit. Inuit get 80% of their calories from fat and protein. They're very, very healthy doing that. Some tribes of Native American Indians got 80% of their calories from red meat, very healthy doing that. And at the other end of the scale, you've got African tribesmen getting 80% of their calories from whole grains, sorghum, like millet. Very, very healthy doing that as well. But the thing is, in the Western world, we're eating way too much sugar and way too much processed grains that act on your body like sugar for our genetics. All right. And so another thing I want to is about bread. The bread you're eating is nothing like the bread your grandparents ate. The hybridization of grain has meant that the gluten content continues to rise in bread. And gluten's an indigestible protein that, for a lot of people, their immune system is responding to it. In fact, BioHealth, the #1 testing and allergy and intolerance facility in America, have found that 70% of light-skinned people tested have some degree of gluten intolerance. I'll give you an example of this. I had one lady who was in her 20s. And she had rheumatoid arthritis. She had rheumatoid arthritis so bad she couldn't get up off the floor from changing her baby. All right? We got gluten out of her diet, and within a number of months, she was able to come off her medication. She's since gone on to do numerous marathons, including the 100K Trailblazer. Okay? Just from getting this. If you have anything wrong with you, gluten's gone. All right? This is Tim. Okay, this is Tim when he's comparing his tummy next to his pregnant daughter. And so Tim at this stage was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. He was obviously a little bit overweight. He had high blood pressure and sleep apnea. Tim wasn't eating the right foods for him. And this is what it's all about, eating the right foods for you. This is Tim just a couple of weeks ago. Okay? Tim was very excited because he'd just been told by his doctor that he no longer has type 2 diabetes. He's obviously doesn't need to lose any weight now. He no longer has high blood pressure and he no longer has sleep apnea. It's about eating the right foods for you. So do we get everything we need from our diet? So when I was doing my master's degree in nutrition, I had to get the most comprehensive nutrition analysis software that you can get. And as soon as you get it, I was really excited, right? Because my diet's pretty good. And so I'm like, you put all your food in there, and it gives you like a 6-page printout of all the nutrients you get from your food. And so I put, what I eat in there, which is a lot of leafy greens and quinoa salads and chicken drumsticks and tuna and stuff like that. Put all that in there, and I was astounded that I was deficient in a number of nutrients from the RDA. And so I started looking at New Zealand deficiencies. And we've got multiple New Zealand deficiencies. Vitamin D, 84% of New Zealanders are deficient in vitamin D. 84%, that's at 18 nanomoles, which is the level that nutritionists believe is the minimum amount, 84%. Without vitamin D, it controls the DNA of your cells, it modulates your immune system, it controls belly fat. Okay, so if you haven't got enough of it, you're just going to get belly fat. 91% iodine. 91% of people tested for whole body iodine sufficiency are deficient in iodine. Without iodine, you can't. In fact, without iodine, basically, it controls your metabolism. So without iodine, you basically can't lose body fat no matter what you do. Best source of iodine, by the way, is going to be seaweeds. I've tested over 4,000 people for zinc, and over 30% of the people I've tested for zinc have been deficient in zinc. Zinc controls over 200 enzymes within your body. If you haven't got enough zinc, you're stuffed. It's plain and simple. Right? For example, you can't make serotonin, your feel-good, happy hormone, without that. So New Zealanders are known for being deficient in selenium. Blood selenium levels are 1.1. We really need to be at 1.6, 1.7. So go ahead and eat nutrient-dense foods. I recommend you eat leafy greens 3 times a day. Organ meats, liver would be fantastic. So I would recommend, give you 3 actions. Grow your own veggies, shop locally, seasonally, and purchase spray-free. Minimize gluten-containing foods and eat the right levels of protein, fat, and carbohydrate for you. And eat leafy greens 3 times a day, organ meats daily, or supplement a high-quality multivitamin. Remember, nourish yourselves. You are what you eat, and look forward to a brand new body in 7 years' time. Thanks so much. Thank you.